Forget about the rules. Forget about what everybody tells you miniature painting should be. Paint your way. Follow somebody if you want to. Follow Sam Lenz. Follow Phil Hall. Follow some of the amazing artists that we have on YouTube and in this community. Take a class somewhere. Or don't.
Dude, what am I supposed to do?
Hello! So today we're talking about miniature painting, because basically you asked us to.
So, okay, gonna have to go back, Scooby-Doo, back into the past.
So in the 80s, there wasn't any guides, there wasn't the internet or anything. And so it was me and some like-minded school friends. We would paint and show each other what we'd done. And then we'd learn off each other.
I started out with the good old YouTube.
I went to my local games workshop where my now friend was working, and he's one of the first people who taught me like the very basics of painting.
Gosh, there's so many resources to get tips from, like on every specific part of the process. And I like that, and sometimes I just really like doing a around and find out.
I'd say the thing that really helped me get started was the speed paints and the speed paint markers, because they gave me confidence that I could paint and come out with models that look as good as I think these do, at least for me.
Thinking back to when I was like a teenager, I don't really recall us ever worrying about making mistakes or not getting the result we wanted. I think we were pretty loose with it, and we made a lot of silly and joke paint jobs. And it was only later, once you start learning a bit more, that you sort of introduce that concept of mistakes to yourself, now that you have a vision that you know you're not able to kind of reach all the time. Do you have a mistake that you've made during your painting that you think you really learned from? Yeah, for sure. I think I have many of those, as you do.
If we want to do this, we are going to have to make mistakes. You are not supposed to be good at this yet. And the only way that you are going to get better is if you try. And if you try, there's going to be trial and there's going to be error.
I think that might be the most important question to answer as a part of this statement. You're not supposed to be good at this. You are going to make mistakes.
One mistake I've learned from is definitely my first time trying to do OSL with yellow. It still sets my case. I've learned.
Varnishing with a rattle can in typical British weather, and then destroyed an entire squadron of Space Marines in seconds as they all went pearly white.
I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but the mistake that I learned the most from is not to get hung up on mistakes. That's some Yoda for you right there.
Overwashed models, which make them look really, really dark. Sometimes less is more.
I've screwed up models to the point where I didn't want to finish painting them.
I decided to try and apply a wash through the airbrush, thinking it would do what a wash does, settle into the recesses. Nope, it didn't. And the pressure was too high and it spattered all over the place.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
I never used an airbrush or a speed paint like product or anything like that. And at that time I was painting a bust that I was super into of a woman with a snake around her neck and a big sombrero. And I had airbrushed the sombrero, and the airbrush leaves a very rough surface. And then I thought, oh, I'm gonna paint over this with speed paint. It just looked horrible, to the point where I never finished it. It's like one of the only times where I feel like I've made such a bad mistake that I didn't even felt motivated to continue working on the model.
So the mistakes I make are usually easily rectified by a healthy dose of isopropyl alcohol, and then I'll just scrub all the paint off and start again.
I screwed up so many models, I don't even know how to pick the worst one. The biggest mistake I've done, and I've done that throughout a lot of years painting, is trying to refine every step of a model. Every step of the way doesn't need to be pretty and neat. The end result needs to be. I think it's a common mistake because you you don't always know the result you're aiming for. You don't know what the end result will look like, so you try to refine every bit. I must have cut my painting time on models in half, realizing that.
Towards the end of a project, when I get onto basing, often that's when I end up with lots of glue flying around, or maybe UV resin, and you get a bit of that on your bit of paper towel. And then you go back and you clean up something else with your paintbrush, and then you just go, oh, I'll just clean my paintbrush into the water, onto the paper towel. Oh, straight into the pile of glue.
As many people who have tried painting white knows, painting white is really, really hard, especially when you spray your miniatures black beforehand.
When I was younger, I would probably be able to give you a long list of all the mistakes I've made. But now I don't really think there's such a thing. I tell the newbies in my painting class, there's no such thing as a bad paint job. You're just not finished yet.
Sometimes the mistakes are what you learn the most from.
Let me just zoom in on the mistake.
No, there's no mistakes. I have to clean that up. Cut.
Some of the lessons that I've learned while making those mistakes are actually really important, because I've learned about myself as a person, what I have patience for and what I don't, what I enjoy and what I don't.
I am continuing to learn as I paint and trying to get better painting, yes, but to get better about like, okay, I've experimented with this thing, I messed up, that technique wasn't right, I wish I would have done the base better, I wish I would have highlighted better, but I try to stop working, like obsessing over a single miniature, and apply those lessons and know that I will apply those lessons to future miniatures.
It's better to do too little than too much.
Coveting models too much has always been my biggest mistake, because it leads to inactivity.
Who knew albino fur was going to be so tricky to get right?
I was trying to assemble a metal hive tyrant, and I've been super gluing it for hours, and whenever I sort of let go or put it down or something would always fall off. And I got so frustrated that I just grabbed it and I just built it into the wall, which was obviously not the right response to solve that issue. But once I sort of cooled down, I remember looking at it and I was like, I gotta learn how to pin my models. And that was very helpful, especially since I later started playing War Machine.
I'm tired, boss.
Once you start to sort of look at the mistakes in hindsight, I think that's really where you learn the most. I think once you start to look at what went wrong.
So I think the mistakes I did in the beginning was that I used too much energy on painting everything on the model. But what I quickly found is that the face, the shields and the bases are just the stuff you see. But the one technique that made me grow as a painter was the humble dry brushing technique. That was exactly what I wanted. I felt that I grew to Golden Demon standard overnight as I learned the proper technique of dry brushing. And I think every painter must have something like that.
One technique that definitely helped me was learning how to actually base coat, and especially zenithal or slap chop base coating. I used to do a simple black base coat, then paint the model, but learning how to do volumetric shading and how to do zenithal or slap chop kind of took my painting up a notch, in my opinion.
Getting into glazing was a big part for me.
Airbrushing.
Airbrush was a technique that helped me grow immeasurably.
Bought my first airbrush 2009, I think, and it changed everything.
A technique that helped me grow definitely was the airbrush. It felt like a real game changer.
I don't want to say airbrushing because that's so... I think that would be the most obvious answer. I think airbrushing is probably the biggest leap.
Cheating. Any technique that I consider cheating. My favorite group of techniques includes things like dry brushing, effect paint, washes. I love me some liquid talent.
How to use a wet palette properly.
Okay, so this is a really simple one, but keep your work area tidy. Clean desk, clean mind, as my grandfather would say.
When you start in the hobby, you try out, you think, oh, maybe I can be original, especially if you start a bit older. Don't do that. Copy people. If you see something awesome, try to replicate that. Before you start a project, get reference pictures. For example, this one, I found like a buttload of reference pictures from all sort of different angles, and I just tried to copy that. And that gave me like a huge level up just trying to, can I do more or less the same as the box art painter? And it's just so much easier if you find some proper reference pictures. I've seen many painters that they get stuck because they don't know how to solve a problem, and reference pictures help with that.
Yeah, because I think there's a difference between copying something and then a recipe.
Yeah, exactly, because you still need to think when you copy people. I think that was better when I started analyzing colors. That gave more freedom and made it more fun to paint.
There is a lot of tutorials and people trying to preach this is the right way of doing it, and there is someone even preaching there is a wrong way of doing it, which is absurd to me. There is easier way of doing stuff, and we can all help each other by learning these things, but you can't read yourself into being a good painter. You can get some really good tips and tricks for beginning. Beginning to paint right now is way easier than when I started. There was no internet when I started. Those shitty models that I had to paint to get that experience, I think people can skip some of that by just learn from other people's experience. But muscle memory and how the paint reacts and how your brush reacts to the paints is something that you can't read yourself into learning. You have to just practice.
And after about 10 years, you might be happy with something you do.
In the beginning, you're very much like, okay, I need to base coat, I need to wash, and then I need to highlight. And then that recipe starts breaking down. Every time you paint a miniature, it breaks down a little bit more and you become more and more loose, and you find your own preferences of how to approach different things. And then, yeah, sometimes you make something where you go, it didn't end up as I wanted it to. Maybe it's just a learning experience, and this particular model didn't turn out as great as I wanted it to. But it's all of it is fuel on the fire of wanting to paint another model.
You instantly start to compare yourself. This is the result I need to aim for, and that's a very big danger. I know that a lot of people are being put off by not reaching that result within months, because we're used to getting that advancement in every other part of our lives. There is just something about this hobby that the more you put into it, the better you get. And some of the people that we compare ourselves with have been painting for many, many years, and some of them do this for a living. People need to not compare themselves with the top end result and just enjoy the process of it. I think that's the most important thing right now.
You're not supposed to be good at this. Don't uphold yourself to other standards, right? Set your own standards, accomplish them, reach your targets, then progress. Don't let this pursuit of being better or this, intimidation by the perfection that you're seeing on social media or around the hobby space stop you from getting started or stop you from progressing.
The big thing that I realised then as well was that I didn't need to be the best at it. I didn't need to win. For me, it was all about the joy of just creating something and looking at it and going, yeah, that's really cool. I made that. And I'd say I've come quite a long way. So I've gone from kind of these guys back then to these guys now. Hopefully a little bit of improvement.
In the process of making this video, I've been thinking about all the miniatures I've painted over the last 20 years. And I've even had a look at some of the older armies or collections. And I remember at the time when I painted them that I was really satisfied with their outcome. And I think it's important to remember that as you go on this painting journey, your first miniature you'll be happy with, and the miniature you painted yesterday you'll be happy with. Otherwise we wouldn't carry on. And one of the things is each collection or each army that you paint, you may paint it slightly differently, and then 15 years down the line you take another look, you perhaps would notice the flaws in those miniatures that you wouldn't do today, but it doesn't mean you still can't be happy with the output. And I think that's really important to remember.